Have you ever wondered why some people work with such an unusual spark? They arrive early, stay late, and always smile while doing the things others try to avoid. I used to think they had something special. Maybe they were just born with more positive energy. But then I realized most of them simply learned how to motivate themselves, while the rest of us are still living under orders, rules, and the fear of being judged. When I was young, I was taught that everything had boundaries. Parents set rules. Teachers checked homework. Bosses gave quotas. Society scored our behavior. These boundaries helped shape us into good people, but they also trained us to only act when someone is watching. I used to ask myself, if one day no one was looking, would I still do the right thing? Would I go beyond what's expected? Or would I stop at just enough to avoid criticism? Beyond boundaries. Those two words kept echoing in my mind. But beyond what? I didn't think it meant breaking rules or rebelling. Over time, I came to see that the boundaries we must cross are not out there. They are within us, inside our minds, where we believe we are only good when someone approves. We only try when someone pushes. We only feel joy when we're allowed. I once met a leader who never gave orders, never needed to remind anyone. He would simply say a few words, and the whole team would want to do more and do better. I remember one afternoon, he stood in front of a whiteboard and wrote 3 words, "Do it because you want to, not because someone told you to." I thought that sentence was simple, but when I looked back, I realized most of us live our whole lives never truly doing anything because we want to. We do it because we have to. Maybe you've been like me, waking up to the sound of an alarm, repeating the same old habits just to survive the day. You tell yourself, I have to go to work. I have to turn in this report. I have to call my mom. And somewhere along the way, you forget what it feels like to want. That quiet wanting fades under the weight of all the have-tos. I remember the first time I asked myself, if no one checks, will I still do my best? That question shook me. It forced me to face a painful truth. I was living like a reaction machine. Others drew the lines, and I just ran within them. No more, no less. I wasn't self-motivated. I was simply controlled. But then I started noticing. There are people who go above and beyond, not for rewards, not for praise. A teacher at my old school stayed up late just to help a student understand a math problem. A friend of mine picked up trash in a park, not because anyone asked, but because he wanted the place to look better. I kept wondering, what makes them different? I searched for answers in psychology studies, in conversations with mentors, and I came to a realization. Self-motivation is not about willpower. It's about meaning. When we see the value in what we do, when we understand why we're doing it, the energy comes naturally. No one needs to push us. We move forward on our own. I used to think motivation was something others had to give me. But the truth is, motivation only awakens when there's something inside to wake up. A small flame, sometimes buried under fear, routine, and the belief that we're not good enough. But that flame is still there. And when we reconnect with meaning, when we realize we're not just living to survive, but to feel, that flame ignites. I remember a mentor once said, "You don't need someone to push you when you can see where you're going." I realized that what holds us back is not a lack of strength, but a lack of direction. When our goal is simply to avoid trouble, we run just fast enough not to get caught. But when our goal makes our heart beat faster, we don't need anyone watching. I saw this truth in myself. There was a time I started a project no one asked for. No boss, no deadline, no reward, just curiosity and a desire to build something meaningful. And I worked harder than ever. I didn't check the clock. I didn't compare. I just did it because I wanted to. And in those hours, I felt what real freedom is. Going beyond boundaries doesn't mean doing more than others. It means doing it from within, without waiting for permission. That's when you stop needing someone behind you to remind you. You stop needing rewards to commit. You stop needing fear to move. You act because you choose to, because it matters to you, because you believe it's worth it. When I share this, people often ask, how do I get that feeling? How do I truly motivate myself? And I usually smile, because it doesn't come from self-help books or posters on office walls. It comes from answering 3 simple questions. Questions that may seem small, but they shape how we live. But before we get to those questions, let's pause. Think about today. Is there something you're doing just because you have to? Something that once excited you, but now feels like a routine? If so, hold on to that feeling. Because only when we see the emptiness can we begin to fill it with something truly meaningful. The journey beyond boundaries doesn't begin with running faster. It begins with knowing why you're running. And to find that, we must start from the deepest place, from the feeling of being empowered, from the courage to believe we can, that we are enough to make a difference, even with a single step. So when I talk about self-motivation, I'm not talking about becoming a superhero or changing the world. I'm talking about looking in the mirror and asking yourself, if no one told me, would I still do this? That answer will show you whether you're living within boundaries or beyond them. And to truly go beyond, we must start with ourselves, with the belief that we can, that we have the ability, that we still hold the power to choose. 3 things that may seem small, but they are the foundation of real freedom, of energy that no one else needs to give you. When you know you can, you've already walked half the path. When you understand the meaning behind what you do, you've gone even further. And when you see that you have the power to choose that path, motivation is no longer something to search for. It becomes something that naturally grows inside you. That's where the real story begins. In the moment you realize, motivation doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within, from the quiet certainty that says, I can. And sometimes, all it takes is one person asking the right question for you to find that strength you thought you had lost. There's something fascinating about how we search for inner strength. We often think that motivation comes from the outside, a compliment, a reward, a look of approval. But true motivation only begins to rise when we feel we have ownership over our own life, when we believe that we can, that our efforts matter, that we are choosing our path with intention. That feeling is called empowerment, but not the kind someone gives you. It's the kind you give yourself. I once heard a popular definition. Empowerment is when a boss says, get it done, with less time and fewer resources. I believe in you. It sounds noble, but that's not empowerment. That's just pressure wrapped in responsibility. What I'm talking about is something entirely different, the freedom to act from a place of self-trust, not fear of consequences. One morning, I was sitting in a familiar cafe when I saw a young waitress, probably under 25, wiping down tables. No one paid attention to her. People came and went, but she carefully cleaned every drop of water, adjusted every chair. I asked, are you afraid your manager will scold you if you don't do it so thoroughly? She smiled. No, I do it because I like seeing things neat. It helps me breathe easier. Her answer made me pause. She wasn't doing it out of fear. She was doing it because it made her proud. And I thought maybe that's what true self-motivation is. Not doing something because you have to, but because you choose to. So how do you know if you're truly empowered? For me, it comes down to 3 small questions I carry with me through life. And if you can say yes to all 3, you'll realize that motivation is not something you need to chase. It's something you awaken. The first question, can I do this? This is a question of capability. When we believe we're capable of doing something, we're willing to begin. But when our mind is filled with doubt, I'm not good enough, I don't have time, I'll mess it up, our energy fades before we even start. Psychologist Albert Bandura called this self-efficacy, the belief in our own ability. I once met a single father working 2 jobs to raise his daughter. One day he told me, there were times I thought I couldn't make it. No rest, no help. But then one night, I saw my daughter sleeping on the couch, hugging the teddy bear I gave her. And I thought, I can do this. From that moment on, I didn't feel tired anymore. No one had to motivate him. His belief that he could, that was his power. The second question, will this work? This is a question of trust in the process. Sometimes we don't doubt ourselves, but we doubt the method. We think, this won't lead anywhere. And once we stop believing in what we're doing, motivation collapses. We keep going just to finish, not to succeed. A friend of mine once tried to lose weight. She tried everything, fasting, running, detoxing. Nothing lasted. Eventually, she chose the simplest way. Walk 20 minutes a day and eat a little less. No magic, just consistency. 6 months later, She had lost nearly 10 kilos. I asked, "What made you stick with it this time?" She smiled. "Because I believed it worked. Not because someone said it would, but because I saw each small step making a difference. When you trust the process, even the smallest action becomes meaningful." The third question: is it worth it? This is a question of purpose. You might believe you can. You might believe it works. But if it doesn't feel meaningful, you won't keep going. B.F. Skinner once said, "Selection by consequences. Everything we do is guided by the outcome we hope for. When we feel something is worth it, we naturally want to continue." I met a woman who worked at a nursing home. The pay was low, the work was tough. But she came in every day with a smile. I asked, "What keeps you from quitting?" She answered, "Because I know what I do matters. I help them feel peaceful for one more day." I will never forget the look in her eyes, the look of someone who knows that value is more powerful than reward. When all three questions are answered with a yes, we feel competent. And when we feel competent, we no longer need someone watching over us. But how do we make that feeling real, lasting, and not just a passing moment? The answer lies in two things: feedback and recognition. Feedback is how life says, "I see your effort." When someone notices what you're doing, even just with a thank you, it confirms your energy is seen. But sometimes we forget that feedback can also come from ourselves. A glance in the mirror. A quiet thought that says, "I did better than yesterday." That too is feedback. A freelance worker once told me, "I don't have a boss. No one praises me. If I don't recognize myself, I'll burn out." And she was right. Because if you wait for others to validate you, you'll always depend on them. But if you learn to validate yourself, you become free. Sometimes, all it takes is a small shift in perspective to bring your energy back. I remember a colleague once complained her job was boring, just filing paperwork. I said, "If you think you're sorting files, yes, it's dull. But if you see it as helping the system run smoothly so others can do their work better, then you're keeping the heart of the organization beating." She laughed, but from that day on, she seemed happier. The meaning we place on our actions can change the entire experience. The power of feeling like you have a choice is greater than you think. When we feel we get to decide, we feel lighter, more engaged, more accountable. But when we think we have no choice, we grow tired, resistant, even rebellious. Because we were not born to be controlled. We were born to feel free in our actions. I once knew a nurse. One day she said, "Sometimes I feel completely exhausted. But when I remember that I chose to care for people, not that I was forced to, I feel stronger." That shift from being forced to being chosen changed how she saw everything. Sometimes, just changing one word changes your world. When you say, "I have to do this," you're stuck in a passive role. But when you say, "I get to do this," you're reclaiming agency, and your inner world shifts with it. I believe that somewhere inside you, there's still a part that wants to live that way, free, capable, and full of meaning. Maybe it's buried under obligations, routines, and endless have-tos, but it's not gone. When you start to feel even a little bit of that freedom in one small choice, choosing to speak kindly, choosing to go for a walk instead of sinking into your chair, choosing to listen instead of judge, you're restarting your inner engine. Because self-motivation is not about forcing yourself forward. It's about giving yourself permission to want. And when we are allowed to want, we truly begin to live. And when we live, we tap back into that flow of energy that was always there in our hearts. And from that feeling doing because we want to, not because we have to, we begin to touch something even deeper. The realization that sometimes motivation doesn't only come from within, but from those who walk beside us. From a look, from trust, from the quiet sense that we belong to something greater than ourselves. One autumn afternoon, I sat in my office, looking out through the glass window. Outside, the sun lit up a small street. People hurried by, car horns blared, laughter echoed, the wind whispered through the trees. And in that moment, a simple but haunting question came to mind. Am I living to avoid something or to move towards something? That question cut through layers of habit like a small blade. Because most of us don't act to find success. We act to avoid failure. We go to work so we won't get fired. We reply to emails, so no one complains. We stay quiet, so we won't be criticized. We've become so skilled at avoiding trouble that we sometimes forget what it feels like to move towards something we truly want. I looked around at my coworkers, all busy, but in their eyes, something was missing: joy. They were living from a place of "I have to," not "I want to." A friend once told me, "I don't hate my job, but I don't love it either. I'm just trying not to fall behind." That sentence made me think of two kinds of people: success seekers and failure avoiders. Both work hard, but their energy comes from different places. One moves forward out of desire, the other out of fear. And when we live in fear, no matter how far we go, we never feel free. I saw that truth clearly in a very small moment. I was giving a presentation to a group of new employees. Halfway through, I asked, "How many of you feel excited about the work ahead?" Only a few hesitant hands went up. "How many of you feel nervous about making mistakes?" Nearly every hand in the room. I smiled. Because that is the story for most of us. We're not afraid of hard work. We're afraid of being wrong, being judged, of losing something. And that fear slowly suffocates our natural motivation. The world teaches us how to avoid being wrong more than it teaches us how to choose what's right. From childhood, we're graded by our mistakes, not our curiosity. We grow up and carry that pattern into our jobs, our relationships, our lives. We stop trying, stop asking, stop risking, all just to avoid trouble. But avoiding trouble never brings happiness. It only helps us live quietly inside a cage. I remember once asking a successful woman, the CEO of a major media company, "What keeps you inspired after all these years?" She didn't hesitate. "Because I don't work to avoid failure. I work to discover my own limits." Her words struck a chord. She wasn't afraid of mistakes. To her, every mistake was proof she was reaching beyond where she had been before. We often say, "You need motivation to act." But sometimes, the opposite is true. Take action first, and motivation will follow. When we do something with the mindset that we choose to, that we want to, even something small, folding a shirt a little neater, writing one more line on a project, smiling at a stranger in the elevator, the energy inside us begins to shift. A new current flows through the heart, and things feel lighter. Someone once asked me, "How do I get my motivation back when I'm exhausted?" I said, "Start with one action that reminds you that you still have a choice. Maybe it's writing a few lines in a journal, calling an old friend, going outside for a walk, or simply allowing yourself to feel what you feel." Because the moment we realize we still have a choice, even just in how we respond, we reclaim our strength. If you're listening to this and something inside you stirs, maybe you've been there too, living just to avoid mistakes, to avoid losing, to avoid getting hurt. And if what I say resonates, share it. Because out there, someone might need to hear this. A like, a small comment, a simple share sometimes. That's enough to help someone realize they're not the only one struggling to feel alive again. I know, because I was once saved by a small message like that. I remember that day clearly. I was on the verge of giving up. I had worked so hard I couldn't feel anything anymore. Every day felt like a meaningless loop. And then, a coworker handed me a small piece of paper. It said, "Maybe you just forgot why you started. Maybe he just wanted to comfort me." But those words made me stop. I realized I hadn't lost my motivation. I had just dropped the reason. When we forget our why, everything becomes an obligation. But when we remember, even the smallest things come back to life. I looked again at my work, the lessons I taught, the questions from my students, the way their eyes lit up when they understood something. I remembered I didn't do this because someone told me to. I did it because I wanted to see people grow. And just by remembering that, the energy returned. Maybe the same is true for you. Maybe you've forgotten the reason you started your job, your relationship, your current path. Try closing your eyes. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, am I doing this to avoid pain or to find joy? If the answer is to avoid pain, be gentle with yourself. That's human. But then, slowly begin to lean toward the other side. Let your heart reach for what makes it light up, not just what keeps it safe. One evening, I was walking home past a small shop being cleaned up. The shop owner, a middle-aged man, was carefully arranging every spice jar, every cup. I stopped and asked, "You're still here?" He smiled. "I want everything to look nice when I open tomorrow. I like starting the day in a space I've made ready. I walked away with that sentence in my pocket. It was simple, but in it, I felt freedom. He got to do it, not had to. When we act from want, we become the creators of our own lives. When we act from fear, we're just reacting. And that is the difference between living and merely surviving. I think of my younger self, always afraid to fail, always seeking approval. I used to think a single, "well done," would make me feel better. But over time, I learned praise may push us for a moment, but meaning is what keeps us going. When we know why we do something, no one has to remind us. We just keep going. This world is full of voices telling us what we should do, how we should live, but maybe what we need most is a quiet space to ask ourselves, what do I want? That question, if asked deeply enough, can change everything. Because when we truly want something, all the outside barriers shrink. The feeling of "I have to" fades, and "I get to" takes its place. I get to learn. I get to try. I get to live. And in that moment, we no longer need motivation from others. It's already blooming within us. But motivation, no matter how powerful, can't last forever if we isolate ourselves. Because we weren't made to live alone. Even the strongest among us need a hand, a look, a moment of understanding to remind us that we belong to something greater than just ourselves. And I began to see the journey of self-motivation doesn't end with the self. It only becomes complete when we learn to connect with the world around us, when we understand that we are not alone in this effort, because sometimes just knowing someone else is walking beside us is enough to keep going. I still remember that cold morning clearly. I was sitting on a stone bench outside the hospital, holding a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. In front of me sat a middle-aged woman, quietly holding her father's hand. The old man was too weak to speak, but he gently squeezed her hand in return. That small gesture brought back something I had forgotten. We weren't born to live alone. Yes, people can find their own motivation. We can be confident and resilient. But in the end, what keeps us going is not just personal strength. It's our connection to others. I used to believe that to be free, I had to be independent. I saw independence as a symbol of strength. I don't need anyone, I used to say, as if that proved my worth. But the farther I went, the more I realized that total independence is a lonely illusion. No one stays strong for too long when standing alone. And sometimes, it's in the moments when we allow ourselves to lean on others, to be loved, to be helped, that we rediscover our deepest source of strength. I first realized this after hearing a friend talk about the poem The Cookie Thief by Valerie Cox. The story is so simple it's almost funny, yet it holds a truth that reaches the heart. A woman at an airport buys a bag of cookies and sits down to read. Next to her is a stranger. As she eats, he also takes a cookie from the bag between them. She's angry, thinking how rude he is. But he just smiles and even shares the last cookie. When she boards the plane, she finds her bag of cookies still untouched in her bag. The cookies he shared were his. She was the one unknowingly taking what wasn't hers. The first time I heard that story, I laughed. But afterward, a heavy silence settled in my mind. I realized I had lived like that woman too many times, judging others through the lens of my own assumptions, misunderstanding, closing the door on connection because I thought I was right. That story made me ask myself, how many times have I missed the chance to truly understand someone just because I wouldn't look beyond myself? We're raised to believe that independence is the pinnacle of adulthood. From a young age, we're told, you have to do it yourself. Don't rely on anyone. Only the strong survive. And to some extent, that's true. But the problem is, as we grow up, we never learn when to stop fighting alone. We forget that true strength isn't in not needing anyone, but in knowing how to be strong together. A firefighter friend of mine once said something I've never forgotten. In a burning building, if you try to be the hero and do everything alone, you'll be the first to die. He explained that in their job, survival doesn't come from individual skill, but from trusting that the person next to you won't leave you behind. When we believe in our community, we act differently. Just like when we believe in ourselves, we walk more confidently. Maybe the deepest human motivation isn't to be praised or to succeed, but to feel that we matter to someone else. We want to contribute. We want to be seen, recognized, and to belong. And when we feel that bond, something powerful awakens in us. It's no longer, I have to try. but we'll try together. I once witnessed a small company go through a rough patch, a failed project, declining revenue. Everyone was exhausted, but instead of blaming anyone, the manager simply said, "We started this together, and we'll find a way through together." The energy in the room shifted. They were no longer individuals under pressure. They were a community, standing side by side. And miraculously, within a few months, that company not only recovered, it grew stronger than before. Not because of a flawless strategy, but because of the trust they had in each other. I've come to believe that people don't burn out because of work. They burn out when they feel alone in their efforts. But when they know that someone sees them, someone cares, they keep going. A small community, even just one person, can breathe life back into fading motivation. I remember the moment that woman in the airport realized her mistake. Her shame wasn't just about misunderstanding someone. It was about forgetting how to empathize. Empathy is the first bridge between two souls. When we dare to look at someone without judgment, we're inviting them into our world. And in that connection, motivation begins to grow naturally. Someone once asked me, how do I find motivation again when I feel lonely? I said, start by helping someone. Motivation doesn't only come when we're helped. It comes when we help others feel that they can. When we give, we remind ourselves that we still have something of value. When we become part of someone else's story, our own life regains its meaning. I once had a student, quiet and unsure of herself. She rarely spoke in class. One day, I asked her to help another classmate with a project. When I returned, she was explaining gently, her eyes bright, her voice calm and confident. After class, she came up to me and said, "I didn't know teaching someone could make me feel so strong." I smiled, because that is the secret of motivation. It grows when we share it. When we connect with others, we don't just find them. We rediscover the forgotten parts of ourselves. The confidence we thought we had to build alone is actually nurtured in the spaces where we belong. But let's be clear, connection doesn't mean dependence. Connection is about being seen, not clinging. It means, I'm strong because I know you're there, not, I'm weak if you're not. It's the freedom within closeness, what psychology calls healthy interdependence. We live in a time that glorifies the self. Social media pushes us to build personal brands, to stand out, to prove we're different. But sometimes, the harder we try to be independent, the lonelier we become. Because in all the noise of self-promotion, we forget that connection is what gives life its echo. I remember a line from a former colleague. If there's no one to share your success with, it's just a number. I didn't fully understand it until the day I achieved something I had worked toward for years. I held that certificate in my hand, but there was no one beside me to share the moment. And the joy, though real, felt silent. From that day on, I began to open up more, not just to receive, but to give. And the more I live, the more I believe that community isn't something we find. It's something we build. It could be a small book club, a friend who listens, or just a shared smile with the barista at your local cafe. Each of these moments is an invisible thread that ties us back to the world. Personal motivation is the flame, but community is the home where that flame stays alive. When we are seen, heard, and understood, we don't just grow stronger, we grow kinder. And so, I began to understand the journey of breaking through our inner walls is not a solo race. It's a harmony where each person brings their own rhythm, their own melody, to create a shared song of growth. But the story doesn't end there, because somewhere in my memory, there's a moment that taught me all of this, not through theory, but through the experience of a 10-year-old child, holding a drumstick and a small dream about sound. A story that began with a very quiet beat, but has echoed in me for a lifetime. I was about 10 years old when my parents asked, "Do you want to learn the drums?" That question felt like a sudden spark lighting up my ordinary childhood. I had always been mesmerized by drummers on TV, hands moving like the wind, powerful rhythms beating like the heart of the band. I didn't even pause to think. I said, yes, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. In my young mind, that dream glowed as brightly as the stage lights. My parents smiled. They weren't wealthy, but they made a promise. If you work hard and your teacher says you're making progress, we'll buy you a better drum. And so I began, with a second-hand drum bought at an auction, a pair of chipped drumsticks, and a heart full of excitement. I believed I could do anything, and for the first few weeks, I truly did. My first teacher was a gentle old man who always brought his own shiny drum kit to our lessons at home. Each session, he placed his drum next to my old one and said, "Let's try this today." He'd tap out a rhythm rat-a-tat-tat quick and steady, each beat like the heartbeat of something alive. I tried to follow, clumsy at first, but his eyes were always full of patience. And every time I got it even a little right, he'd nod, and the whole world seemed to brighten. One day, he taught me a new technique, the paradiddle. He said, "Watch this. Right, left, left, left." I watched closely, then tried it myself. My first taps were shaky, but soon the rhythm began to settle. I still remember laughing out loud when my sound matched his. He said, "Yes, that's it. You're doing great." Just those few words made me want to practice all night. That was the first time I truly understood the power of being seen. Not rewards, not praise full of fancy words, just the feeling that someone noticed. I started waking up earlier, sitting beside my old drum, hands resting on its cold surface, my heart beating fast. I didn't need reminders, alarms, or anyone pushing me. I just wanted to keep going. Then one day, my teacher brought a new challenge. "Today, we learn the drum roll," he said gently, as if it were just the next step. I nodded, confident I'd do it like I always had. He played the pattern smooth, fast, seamless, like a steady wave. I picked up my sticks and tried. My sound came out choppy, uneven, even a little ridiculous. I tried again and failed again. "That's okay," he said. "You'll get it next week." But the next week came, and I still couldn't do it. And the week after, nothing changed. Every time he asked, I lowered my head. I started dreading our lessons. The drum I once loved now echoed only with failure. I remember once blurting out, "I can't do it." He just smiled. "You just need more practice." But I didn't believe it anymore. That was the first time I truly felt powerless trying my hardest, yet getting nowhere. I kept going to lessons, but my heart wasn't in it. I'd look at the drum and not even touch it. My parents asked, "What's wrong? Don't you like drumming anymore?" I just shook my head. They didn't know I still liked it, but I had lost the belief that I could. One afternoon, on my way home, I ran into the music teacher from school. He knew I was learning drums, so he asked, "How's it going? Making progress?" I looked down. "No, I can't do the drum roll. I've tried so many times." He looked at me for a moment and said, "When something feels too hard, break it into smaller pieces." I frowned. "Break it how?" He smiled. "You know how to do a paradiddle, right?" I nodded. "Then you already have half of it. A drum roll is just 2 strokes together. Break it down, then build it back up." That night, I tried again. I hit 1 stroke, then paused. Another stroke, then connected them. Ta-ta-ta-ta. I practiced all evening slowly, steadily, until the sound became smoother, rounder. For the first time in weeks, joy returned to my hands. The following week, when my teacher arrived, he asked, "Ready?" I said nothing. I just picked up my sticks and played. 1 beat, then another, then a flowing rhythm, fast and even. When I stopped, the room went silent for a moment. Then he laughed and clapped. "That was amazing! How did you do it?" I answered, still catching my breath. "I broke it into small parts." His eyes lit up. "You've just reminded me how to teach." In that moment, I realized I wasn't just learning to play drums. I was learning how to overcome helplessness. When something feels too big, too difficult, we can break it down until there's one part we can manage. And once we master that part, belief comes back. I stayed by my drum late into the night, letting the steady beats echo through the small room. It wasn't the sound of effort anymore. It was the sound of belief returning. In each beat, I felt my teacher's patience, my parents' quiet hope, and the small determination within me. Looking back, I see what my parents had taught me about positive consequences. They gave me a clear vision. If you make progress, we'll buy you a new drum. My first teacher gave me a sense of competence, the feeling that I could. My second teacher gave me choice, the power to see the problem from a new angle. And through all of it, I was never truly alone. I had them, my small community. All of that wove together into one simple truth. Motivation is not magic. It is created when we feel capable, when we know why it matters, when we have a choice in how we do it. and when we don't have to walk the path alone. I grew up and gradually left my old drum behind. But whenever I meet someone tired, discouraged, or close to giving up, I think of that little boy. I understand now people don't lose motivation because they're lazy. They lose it because they forget what it feels like to have control over even one small part of the problem. And sometimes all it takes is someone who believes in them, who says, "You can break it down," for them to move forward. I believe each of us has a drum roll we haven't played yet, a dream, a project, a goal we've been too afraid to try. But if we're willing to listen, to break it down, to start again with just one beat, we'll find that rhythm is still there. No one needs to push us. No reward is necessary. All we need is the belief that we can create our own sound. And when that sound finally rises, even if it's in the quiet room of our own life, it's enough to remind us that all motivation begins in the deepest place within us, the place where we believe we can. After that evening, the sound of the drum was no longer just wood and skin. It became the rhythm of something deeper within me. Every time the stick struck the surface, it felt like I was tapping on the edge of my own limits, and each beat was a quiet affirmation that I was still learning, still living, still moving forward. But as I grew older, I began to see that the lesson from the drum wasn't just about breaking things down and trying harder. There was something deeper within it, a quiet wisdom about human connection, about how much we learn from one another when we allow ourselves to be open. One afternoon, I was invited back to the school where I first learned music. The same old classroom, the scent of worn wood and peeling paint, soft yellow light streaming through the windows. A group of students gathered around a drum set, faces lit with excitement. The music teacher, older, now saw me and smiled. "Someone who once nearly gave up on the drum roll is here to help you all today." The whole class laughed. I laughed too, but something inside me stirred. I looked at those young faces and saw myself in them. I said, "When I first learned to play drums, I thought I had to be good right away. I thought failure was the end. But really, failure is just the first beat in the long rhythm of growing up." The room fell quiet. Then I sat down, picked up the drumsticks, and tapped out a gentle rhythm. Ta, 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 ta. A few of the kids joined in, clumsy but eager. I smiled, realizing I was no longer the student. I had become the one passing it on. We often think we only learn when someone teaches us, but in truth, we also learn when we teach. I realized that day, when I had once taught my teacher how to master the drum roll again, it wasn't because I was better. It was because I was sharing a moment of discovery. And that moment made me feel stronger than ever. Because when we help someone feel like they can, we reinforce that belief within ourselves. One of the hardest parts of growing up is learning to be humble enough to receive and brave enough to give. We're so used to proving that we know, that we're capable, that we're in control. But the truth is, none of us has it all. Each of us carries only a piece of the greater lesson. When we allow ourselves to receive, we open the door to the world. And when we dare to give, we open ourselves to something bigger. Between those two doors, self-motivation is born. I once met a woman working for a nonprofit that helped children in underprivileged areas. She told me that some days, the exhaustion made her want to quit. The workload was heavy, the resources were few, and progress was slow. I asked, "So what keeps you going?" She smiled. "Whenever I see a child smile, I remember why I started. And when my colleagues feel discouraged, I remind them too. We help each other up, over and over again." Her words left me speechless. Real motivation is not something we keep for ourselves. It's energy that spreads. When we share it, it doesn't fade, it multiplies. Just like one candle can light hundreds of others without losing its own flame. I used to think self-motivation was a lonely journey, an inner battle between I can and I can't. But now I understand. Self-motivation isn't isolation. It's autonomy within connection. It's being strong enough to walk your path and open enough to walk further with someone else. One evening after class, a young boy came up and asked me, "Teacher, what if I try and try, but still can't do it?" I looked at him and saw myself. I said, "If you've truly tried, maybe the problem isn't you. Maybe you just need to look at it differently. Or maybe you need someone to look at it with you." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. It was a simple answer, but I knew I had just handed him a small drumbeat of belief, the way someone once did for me. This world works in strange ways. Everyone's searching for that feeling of, I'm good enough. Yet so few give it to others. We crave motivation from others, but rarely think about how we could be someone else's source of encouragement. I remember an old friend from our school band. He played guitar, never the lead, never in the spotlight, but he was always the one cheering us on. Whenever someone made a mistake during practice, he wouldn't laugh or criticize. He'd simply nod and say, "Nice try. Maybe slow that part down a bit." He never headlined a show, but we all knew the group wouldn't be the same without him. Sometimes, the one who inspires isn't the best performer. It's the one who never lets you feel alone in your effort. Over time, I began to understand that every real success has one thing in common. It's never just one person's. No matter how stubborn we are, we all need resonance. We need someone to believe in us, not to carry us, but to remind us we can still stand. And that's what the drum taught me, that life has its own rhythm. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes loud, sometimes quiet. Sometimes we keep the beat. Sometimes we simply need to listen. But the most important thing is never stop playing. I remember that evening, after the students had gone home, the old teacher came over to me. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his voice rough but kind. "You know," he said, "I've taught my whole life, but sometimes it's the students who remind me why I started." I looked at him and understood motivation isn't just about pushing forward. It's about helping others hold on to their belief. I left the school as night fell. On the drive home, raindrops tapped gently on the car window, blending with the echo of drum beats still playing in my mind. I thought about all the people who've passed through my life, my parents, my teachers, my friends, even strangers I barely knew. Each of them, in their own way, had struck a beat in the music of my life. And because of them, I'm still drumming, still living, still learning. Maybe motivation isn't a destination. Maybe it's an endless conversation between me and those around me, between what I know and what I'm still discovering, between the past and the present. When we understand that, we no longer need to search far for energy. It lives in the connection between us and the world. I believe if one day you feel drained, don't force yourself to push harder. Find someone to talk to, or simply sit beside someone in silence. Sometimes, just the feeling that someone is near is enough to restart the beat in your heart. And if you're feeling strong, be that person for someone else. Say the words you once needed to hear. Tap out the first beat so someone else can find their voice. Because when you help someone else rediscover their motivation, you reignite your own flame. That night, when I got home, I pulled the old drum out from the corner of the closet, wiped away the thin layer of dust. I sat down and played a slow rhythm. The sound rose round and warm as if whispering, "I'm still here." I smiled. In that moment, I knew the lesson wasn't over. It was still echoing softly, gently, through every beat of life. And somewhere out there, maybe someone else is just beginning again with an old dream, trembling hands, and a belief that has just been awakened. That night, after the last drum beat faded, I stayed in the room for a long time. The light dimmed, but the sound still echoed inside me like a heartbeat unwilling to stop. There was something tender and true in that moment, a feeling I couldn't quite name. I only knew that I had touched a deeper layer of myself. As if, after all these years of searching for motivation, I finally realized it was never somewhere far away. It was always here, in my breath, in my memories, in the quiet rhythms of life. I had passed through many phases of this journey. The desire to prove myself, the fear of failure, the rediscovery of meaning, through community, through music, through sharing. All of it seemed to converge into one simple realization. Self-motivation is not a skill to master. It's a process of returning to a natural ability we all once had as children, the joy of being alive, the curiosity to explore, the excitement of creating something new. I used to think motivation was a flame, something to be protected from the wind and the rain. But now, I see more clearly. It's not a flame. It's a current. When blocked by fear, it stalls. But when opened by connection, it flows freely again. We can't command it. We can only clear the path for it to return. Looking back on my own path, 4 words come into focus, 4 C's. Like the 4 main beats in the rhythm of a life. Competence, consequence, choice, Community. I understand now that real, lasting motivation comes only when these four come together, inseparable, like the layers of a melody. Competence when we feel capable, when we believe we can create results. No one else can believe in us if we don't first believe that we can. But competence isn't born overnight. It's grown through feedback, through recognition, through trying, even when our hands still tremble. Consequence when we know that what we're doing matters. Not just in terms of reward or punishment, but in true value. When our actions, no matter how small, make the world a little better, we don't need anyone to push us. Choice when we have the freedom to choose. Just the quiet sense of, I get to do this, is enough to breathe life into even the most ordinary task. Freedom isn't about how many options we have. It's about realizing that we are choosing. And finally, community, because no one can sustain motivation alone. We need people walking beside us. We need trust. We need the kind of gaze that understands without judgment. I don't remember exactly who taught me those four words. Maybe it was a teacher, maybe my parents, maybe failure itself whispering in the dark. But I know this. When any one of those four goes missing, the fire within begins to dim. When we don't feel competent, we doubt. When we don't see meaning, we lose interest. When we have no choice, we feel trapped. And when we lack community, we feel lost. Once during a talk with a group of young people, someone asked me, how do you maintain motivation when the world keeps changing and the pressure never stops? I paused for a while, then said, remember, motivation isn't something you keep. It's something you nourish every day. And to nourish it, just care for these four things: your competence, your values, your freedom, and your connections. I shared with them the story of the drum roll I once couldn't play. I told them that sometimes we don't move forward not because we're weak, but because we see everything as one impossible block. But when we break it down, when we dare to try just one beat, we begin to realize we're not as helpless as we thought. And once we succeed, even just a little, we feel that small joy rising inside. That joy is the seed of motivation. A young woman in the group, eyes glistening with tears, said quietly, I think I understand now. I don't need someone to push me anymore. I just need to remember why I started. I nodded. Sometimes, that's all it takes. I believe we each carry two rhythms within us, the rhythm of action and the rhythm of emotion. When those two rhythms align, we are fully alive. When they fall out of sync, we're only existing. And our task is to learn how to hear our own music, to know when to be strong, when to be still, when to pause, and when to begin again. One late afternoon, I ran into my old music teacher at a community concert. He was older now, his hair white, but his eyes still bright. He asked, do you still play? I smiled. Not often, but I still drum when my heart needs to hear it. He chuckled, warm and knowing. That's the best way to live, to play only when your heart wants to hear the sound. We sat together in silence, wrapped in the music, and I realized what he had taught me was never about technique. It was always about the rhythm of life. On stage, a little boy was trying to drum, clumsy and offbeat. But the person beside him didn't interrupt. They just watched with quiet encouragement. I saw my younger self in that child and smiled. Life, after all, is like this concert. Everyone has their part, their tone. And when we truly listen to one another, the music becomes whole. I remember someone once said, we can always learn from each other. We need the humility to accept feedback and the courage to speak up. I believe that, because motivation doesn't live in isolation. It grows in dialogue between us and the world, between teacher and student, between past and present. I left the concert late at night. The city was quiet. I walked through old streets where the drums of my childhood once echoed. Each step felt like a soft beat, steady and warm. I thought of the people out there, tired, still searching for their own drum roll. I wish they knew that motivation is not some luxury for the strong. It is the natural right of every human being. We are born with rhythm in us, the rhythm of breath, of heartbeat, of hope. Life may sometimes throw us off. Our rhythm may falter, but if we pause, breathe deeply, and listen, we'll hear that quiet beat still there. And from that beat, we begin again. Self-motivation isn't about pushing harder or running faster. It is the art of returning to ourselves, to our reasons, to those who once believed in us, to the truth that we are still enough to begin again. And if someone asked me what the most valuable lesson I've learned on this journey is, I would say, we don't need to be perfect to keep going. We just need to keep going to become whole. I stood in the quiet street, looking up at the sky, where a few stars peeked through the clouds. In my mind, the drum roll returned soft, steady, like a heartbeat joining the rhythm of the universe. I smiled, because now I know each of us, wherever we are, whatever we're doing, is playing a part in this shared song. A song of humanity, of belief, of connection. A song with no conductor, no command, just each person knowing their own beat. And in that final quiet moment, I heard something rise from deep within. We're all in this together. That sound was not an ending, but the beginning of a new rhythm. The rhythm of trust, of love, of life continuing. And I know, as long as we can still hear it, we'll never truly lose the motivation to live, to love, to grow. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this message touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next journey we take together. Your support means the world to me.